Hello, thank you for inviting me to the Berlin conference. I will now share my screen to talk about institutional open access publishing in Europe. So let me start with an overview. I will briefly give an introduction, then talk about funder-based open access publishing, talk about a variety of institutional open access platforms, talk a little bit about the Open Access Diamond Journal study and the Widera call, and finally, what I think could be a possible project based on the Widera call. Finally, of course, there will be room for questions and discussions. First of all, definitions. Institutional publishing are those publishing activities that make available original scholarly outputs, but that are controlled by the members of the institution, so not controlled by commercial publishing. Indeed, institution is any not-for-profit academic or scholarly organization, as defined on the slide, from research funders to scholarly societies, who all play an important role and can play an important role in scholarly publishing. And finally, Diamond Open Access Publishing, of course, is no-fee open access publishing, free for authors and readers, which rarely use per unit payments, which makes it difficult also to fund them from the outside sometimes. And these are often non-commercial, community-owned and scholar-led. First, a little bit about funder-based open access publishing, because I think that's an interesting new development in the open access publishing landscape. Wellcome Open Research and Gates Open Research allow all of their authors to publish on this platform, which is provided by F1000 Research. It's the single most used publishing venue for Wellcome funded authors these days. And it works by post-publication open peer review. So an article is submitted, it is published if it complies with a number of basic criteria, and then peer review and open peer review take place after publication, and revisions are also done after publication. There is sometimes criticism of this approach, because it is said that this gives the publishing back in the hands of commercial publishing, but note that this is not the case. I mean, there is a clear iron wall here between the ownership of the contents of the platform and the control by the community on the one hand, and the funder, and the publishing services that are provided by F1000. Should the funder wish to do so, they can ask for another provider once the contract is up. This is also the case for the Open Research Europe. Publication of research funded by Horizon Europe and by Horizon 2020 is open to all grantees. And this platform could, or has certainly had the potential to be opened up to other European funders, which I think is an exciting prospect. So I think this is a development that is to be watched, funders taking into their own hands publication of the research results of their grantees, because clearly out of a frustration of with the high prices of commercial publishers on the one hand, and the refusal of many of these, or the hesitancy of many of these publishers to move to open access at a reasonable cost. There's, of course, many other institutional OA platforms in Europe. There's national initiatives like the Croatian Journal Initiative, the Open Edition in France, the interesting project in Spain by FECIT, run by FECIT, to give a seal of quality to certain the Spanish journals. There is, of course, Journal.fi, run by the Federation of Finnish Learned Societies, OpenJournals.nl, which is the latest edition, founded by the Royal Academy of Sciences and the National Funder. So what we see here is a number of initiatives, both by funders, by societies, and by other actors to provide platforms for open access. Diamond Open Access. There's, of course, the well-known Open Library of Humanities, of which my own journal Glossa is a member. This works by a consortial library model, where libraries provide money to run the journal, There's also PsychOpenGold, perhaps unfortunately named by the Leibniz Institute, Research Institute in Germany. They have 11 diamond journals and they're open to 15 more. Now, I did not mean to be complete in any way here. This is just an overview of striking examples of open access platforms across Europe, done by different actors. And I think this is a very interesting and clearly something that is in need of further coordination on the European level, which is also something that came out of the Open Access Diamond Journal study. As you know, Plan S Principle 5 said that the funders should support a diversity of a business model for open access journals and platforms. And Plan S was often criticized for being too much focused on gold open access, something that has changed, of course, with the advent of our rights retention strategy last year. And now we also want to look at what we can do for diamond journals. And in March 2020, we launched a study on Diamond Open Access Journal, which was finalized in March 2021 by a consortium led by Operas. The findings of this study were involved a survey of 1,619 journals with focus group interviews and discovered an archipelago of largely invisible 29,000 journals, 11,500 of which are in DOAJ, mostly relatively small journals. These journals are not all in social sciences and humanities, as could be expected, that 17% are in medicine, 22% in science. They still publish about as much articles per year as APC Gold. So this is a very important aspect of the publishing landscape, even if it is a little bit invisible. And they serve a wide diversity of communities. And these are often national journals and authors, but they reach an international audience. Also, not surprisingly, these journals are significantly strong in multilingualism, which is, of course, an asset that is particularly important for multilingual Europe. The study also had a number of recommendations and next steps. The diamond publishing needs to be organized more efficiently. The study recommended it must be better coordinated and funded to realize its opportunities. So it was recommended that we organize an international workshop and symposium within 6 months. That will be done in February 22 in collaboration with Science Europe and the French Ministry of Education. We also should, as Coalition, has come up with a funding strategy, and we now have a task force dedicated to this task. And we should also try and fund or co-fund a diamond publishing capacity center within 24 months. And I think very timely, the Widera, Horizon Widera call came in time in June to respond to this need. Perhaps something about this Widera capacity building call, which can be consulted by everyone, so this is not a secret. Up to 3 million euros is provided for a maximum of 3-year project to support non-technological aspects of institutional publishing and address its fragmentation. They asked for a comprehensive map of the current landscape, activities to improve coordination of open access publishing, institutional open access publishing in Europe, and also explicit and actionable recommendations for institutions to better support institutional open access publishing in Europe. Now, I don't know, or I cannot tell at this point how many people responded to this call. I have no idea. And also it is bad form to discuss projects that are under evaluation. But I would like to comment here simply on what I think any possible project that responds to this call should pay attention to. And this is mostly a possible project should have as its goal, I think, that to create a scholarly ecosystem that is academic led and owned, that is high quality, sustainable and aligned in its practices and standards, and that represents a recognized and visible alternative to commercial publishing. It should provide a landscape analysis, of course, but in terms of the diversity of open access publishing, size, types of institutions, location, disciplines, and languages, but also its operational practices. What do they do? What's the management, ownership, the user guidelines, the governance like? What is the attention to diversity, equity, and inclusion, and to open science? This project should also introduce and co-create, I think, a flexible European quality standard that takes into account, that aligns practices across disciplines and languages, but also takes into account cultural, economic, and historical differences. At the same time, as being standard, so it should be flexible and clearly have common aspects. We should also enhance the capacities through such a project by providing a common access point with operational toolkits, guidelines, translation services for abstracts, and so on. And finally, of course, for the recommendations, there should be engagement with the highest policymakers to make sure that they improve and raise the profiles of institutional publishing providers they host and support, because institutional publishing very often is invisible in the institutions themselves. And so that is something that definitely should change. I thank you very much for your attention, and I'm open. And I open the paper to questions.